He created a new mystery cult, now known as a worldwide religion called Christianity. That's right, Christianity began as a mystery cult, a sect of the Judaic faith, a mystery cult that was found by Paul of Tarsus. This was the beginning of Gentile Christianity. Paul's doctrines goes against everything that the true prophet Joshua, who was a Messiah, Paul's doctrine goes against everything that the historical Joshua, the true Joshua, taught. In fact, as you will see, Paul presents an entirely different Joshua than the historical Joshua. Because when we talk about the historical Joshua, we're not talking about the Joshua of the Pauline gospel. When we talk about the historical Joshua, we're talking about the real prophet Joshua. He was an anointed prophet of Israel, meaning he was a political figure and he was a reformer, not a deity, not a demigod. No, no. And Paul knew he wasn't going to be able to convince many of the Jews to accept the deified version of Yahshua as a as a demigod. So Paul had no other choice but to go into Europe and start teaching that garbage amongst the polytheistic, pagan-minded Gentiles who were used to worshiping demigods and deify human beings. You know, the problem that Paul was faced with, however, was to get these Gentiles to accept the Judaic faith. He wanted them to accept the Judaic faith, but the Judaic faith consists of laws, statutes, and commandments, moral laws. Paul knew he wasn't going to be able to get them Gentiles to accept strict biblical moral laws. No, no. The Judaic faith, to begin with, is strictly monotheistic. But Paul figured out how to get around that. He figured out how to get around that by using Greek philosophy. Greek philosophy. He was able to present the Messiah as a being, a mysterious being under the title of Godhead. Godhead, which means what? A multi-personal deity, a deity, identified as one single being. So, but the hard part for Paul, like I said, was uh, the thing that was in his way was the Judaic moral laws, the strict Mosaic laws. You know, that was the problem. Laws such as the cleanliness laws, the hygiene laws. Which Gentiles they were going to reject because it's a fact that at this time in history, Europeans didn't even take baths. It was not uncommon to see ministers, Gentile women, openly displaying their uncleanliness in the marketplace. So, and the dietary laws, they were too strict for the Euro Gentiles, who are by nature wild and savage and lawless heathens, especially the law of circumcision. That was going to be a problem promoting circumcision amongst the Gentiles because the Gentiles feared circumcision. They 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 equated circumcision with mutilation, and so Paul had to definitely to give up the idea of even the mention of circumcision among the Gentiles. The Gentiles wasn't going to hear that. The Gentiles, being wild by nature, they had a desire and a taste for blood, wild meat, unclean things. So, in order to get the Gentiles to follow him, in order to get the Gentiles to accept his new version of religion, Paul had to convince the Gentiles that they could be saved in his new faith, without having to adhere to or obey the law. They didn't even have to adhere to any law, statutes, or commandments. You know, so Paul had to give up the Judaic moral law. You know, he had to give that up in order to reach the Gentiles. And Paul, he proclaimed that he had this vision of Yahshua, which brought with it a new faith, a Roman Catholic universal faith, unlike the narrow-minded old Judaic nationalistic faith of the historic Yahshua, but a new and improved faith. Paul said you can accept this faith of the resurrected Messiah without having to keep the old Judaic moral laws, the laws of Moses and the Old Testament prophets were considered to be obsolete. And Paul said that the old Judaic moral laws were actually a burden, and they got to go. These Old Testament laws of the Judean people are outdated legalism. It needs to be done away with. And so what Paul did was start to allow these Gentiles to enter into the church without instructing them about the importance of circumcision, without teaching them to observe biblical dietary laws, hygiene laws. They didn't even like washing their hands before eating. I mean, your Gentiles were just, filthy, nasty. They didn't have to keep any of the hygiene laws. And they actually complained about having to wash their hands before they eat. That was a burden to them. They didn't have to keep the Judaic 7th-day Sabbath, but they could continue keeping Sunday worship, and they actually continued to worship the sun god. They actually saw or believed that Yahshua was reincarnated as the son of the sun god. And they continued to worship the sun god in Rome. And Paul knew all of this was going on, but if he tried to stop paganism within the church, he might not be able to lure the large numbers of Gentiles into his rapidly growing Messianic faith, his rapidly growing mega church. But this eventually caused a problem. It actually led to a division between the Messianic Jews and the Messianic Gentiles of Paul's Christian cult. The Messianic Jews, they kept adhering to and advocating a return to the genuine Judaic faith as Yahshua, the Messiah, had taught them. And this eventually led to a split between the Messianic Jews who continued to follow the teachings of Yahshua, the anointed prophet, and the Gentiles who followed the Pauline gospel. The Gentiles didn't want to adhere to the Judaic faith. They wasn't about to adhere to the strict monotheistic Judaic faith. They accepted Yahshua as the Messiah, as their personal Lord and Savior. They even worshipped him as a deity, as the Son of the Sun God, based on their pagan Greco-Roman traditions, which developed into what we now call Christianity. Christianity, as we know it today, came about as a result of the Apostle Paul. The true Yahshua, the true anointed prophet Yahshua, was a Messiah. He was a Messiah. And he taught strict Judaic monotheism. He taught the Mosaic law. He upheld the Mosaic law. He did not come to destroy the law or the prophets. He came to uphold, to promote. He taught the Mosaic law and the testimony of all the Hebrew prophets. But the Apostle Paul, he taught his own Greco-Roman Hellenized version of Yahshua, the Messiah. Paul taught we don't have to keep the Old Testament laws. He said that we were freed from the curse of the law and that the law was a burden. He taught that the law was a burden and a curse. He taught that Yahshua has freed us from the cursed law, or the curse of the law, as if the law is a curse. But we know that the true historical prophet, Yahshua, the Messiah, he didn't teach nothing like that. Prophet Yahshua, the Messiah, taught his followers, he taught his disciples to humble themselves in obedience to the Judaic moral code, the moral law. The Apostle Paul was not a true apostle of the Messiah. The Apostle Paul was not a true apostle. He was a false apostle. He was a false apostle. The apostles who actually saw and witnessed Yahshua can be considered to be true apostles, but Paul never saw, never met Yahshua. Paul never knew anything about Yahshua, other than that he perceived in his so-called vision. Paul was a self-proclaimed apostle. Paul proclaimed himself to be an apostle. And so you got Christians and